Good morning, everyone. I am sorry I'm a little croaky. I hope you can hear and understand me. It's an incredible pleasure to be here in what is becoming my children's home congregation. And it's lovely to be able to speak with you this morning about UU Faith Action. So I'm going to level with you right here at the beginning of my sermon. I work for UU Faith Action New Jersey, our state social justice and public policy network. And part of my job in that role is to go around the state and inform UUs about our work, to thank you for your support, and to encourage you to get involved. Now, as a minister, I mostly do this by leading worship services, by giving sermons like this one. And in my 1 year on the job, I have found that there isn't a really super great way of getting all the necessary facts and figures I'd like to get across to you about UU Faith Action in a sermon, in a way that is graceful and not so contrived. And I know this because I've tried it several times, including here this past August with some of you. A wiser person than me suggested that I should just come clean right at the beginning, say the important bits about UU Faith Action NJ, and then dive into the heart of the sermon. And so I'm taking her advice, and that is what I'm going to do. And now that I've got you all warmed up and super excited about a bunch of facts and figures, there really are important and certainly useful, and yes, I would argue spiritually nourishing things to say about an organization like UU Faith Action NJ. Let me start off with two fun facts. We just changed our name. You heard Thule struggle mightily with that change, and I think it will take all of us about a year to move from UU Legislative Ministry of New Jersey to UU Faith Action. Over those years, two things became clear as we were thinking about making a name change this summer. It took months for anyone to learn how to say our acronym, UULMNJ, clearly. And two, we have always been called to do much more than support legislative action, although that's a pillar and will remain a pillar of what we do. We offer workshops, several of which are coming up. There will be papers passed out to you at the end of the service that describes an especially important one next Sunday in Montclair following the service at 12:30 to 3. Just days after our very important state election, we will have a new governor, and it will change the landscape for many of the issues that we care about one way or the other in New Jersey. And it'll be a time for all of us to come together and speak about those issues and talk about how we want to envision a future forward that embodies our principles and our purposes. We help connect congregations. We help build interest and inspiration, and especially, and I'm seeing this more and more in my work, we're building a kind of capacity, a capacity of action, but also of spirit, a capacity of heart among UUs to take all those personal things you care about. I expect almost everyone in this room will be voting on Tuesday, but to take them and then elevate them and activate them over the course of the year. Many people who vote would never even dream of writing or emailing their legislator as an issue of time or not sure how to do that. We help make that possible for you. Second fun fact that I can only mention in this sermon, in this congregation, our offices are actually housed right here in this building on either side. Those mystery doors are the vital hub of UU Faith Action NJ. And that is in large part because your congregation is and has been for a long time a very serious contributing member of our work, as are 19 of the 21 total UU congregations in the Garden State, and I'm going to work hard on those last two for this year. Now, Summit, you guys have been on board since the very beginning. Way back when, maybe 8 years ago now, when we first officially incorporated, your board, your leadership, was persuaded that it was worth something to this congregation to help build that statewide voice that both Thule and Emily mentioned. That voice that would champion our shared values despite our different political affiliations, on the issues that we UUs care deeply about, like ending solitary confinement for prisoners that too often drags on, did you know this, for weeks, months, even years in solitary confinement in our state, in our name. You care about taking the necessary steps to switch over from our dirty dependence on fossil fuels, despite the naysayers, despite the folks who say it can't be done. We are pushing for renewable energy sources as fast as we possibly can, and we can be a leader in New Jersey for the entire nation. Or ensuring that gay and lesbian couples have equal marriage rights if they so choose, or ending cash bail in favor of a risk-based system, knowing that we will hear about those bad examples, those Willie Hortons that would be pulled out to suggest that we go back to a system that favors people with money over people who may be stuck in jail for weeks, even months, because they can't afford $3,000 before sentencing. It's true, of course, that many UUs, many of you here, support the same good causes on your own time, and many congregations do as well. What UU Faith Action, I hope and I know, is able to do is unique. Guided by informed UU volunteers working out of our 6 issues-based task forces and an ingenious and sometimes devilish email system that matches your name with that of your individual state legislator. All you do is plug in your zip code and boom, an email comes up that says, I don't believe in solitary confinement the way it's being systematized in our penal system, and shoots it off to your own legislator. You can even personalize those emails. You will have the opportunity to sign up for those action alert emails at the info table outside following the service if you wish, and even if you don't wish. I think you should give it some serious thought, even if all you do is send one email to your legislator because it happens to be the right time and the right place and you have 5 minutes. I would ask you to do that so that we can speak with an even louder voice. It's very cool stuff, and I could go on and on, like about the State Sanctuary Challenge that you are intimately involved with, where we are sending trained teams of volunteers, including several highly effective ones from this congregation, like Tim Katz and Diana Kaiser and Kristen Peck, sending them out to multiple congregations, all of them, we hope, in New Jersey, asking them to find out what local immigrant groups need to stay safe and together during what can only be called a purge campaign of this Trump administration. I could go on about our incredibly awesome interfaith working group called the All Faiths Justice Alliance that includes your very own Claudia Cohen and Laura Murr, which just yesterday at Fountain Baptist down the road was editing some of the final chapters of the toolkit we have created, all 13 of us, to train up congregations of multiple faiths to build relationships with local law enforcement in places like Elizabeth and Cherry Hill, in far northwest Sussex County, and New Brunswick, and yes, in Summit. And not just any old relationship, not a cozy, warm, let's get to know each other relationship, as important as that is, but one that comes clean from the beginning about how messed up so many of us are around race, and how the systems that have been in place for generations, including policing, need to be changed and fast so that our black and brown selves, our neighbors and children, our children, my children, are no longer shot in the back or while seatbelted in their cars. We want to do something local, and we want to do it now. And I hope you'll join in supporting that effort. Do you see how I can go on? And why it's better to get all this out in the open now instead of talking about politics and faith, and then so subtly dropping in notes about how we do this and that. I'm going to be here after the 11:30 service. You're welcome to come back or stay for a short lunch conversation, but especially for questions and answers. So you can find out more, decide if it's something you might be willing to put your name on an email list for. I hope you will. Now, it is also true that this remains a sermon. And a good sermon is never just a lecture, as important and compelling as that lecture might be. A good sermon, in my book anyway, is fundamentally about a good word. Something that helps to ground us, that reaffirms our deepest values, and also our sense of agency, that we have agency in our lives. Which is why I want to spend the next half of my time today talking about the politics of justice. What, you might be thinking? I always think at moments like this of my very concrete computer analyst mother and how she would react to what I am saying to test how far I've gone out on either end. What? I can hear her think in her thought bubble. But he just said he was going to get into the spiritual stuff, not into more politics. And the thought bubble would go ... though I do enjoy a bit of politics in my sermons. I brought her into UUism. It was a good fit for both of us. A deep reflection on any spiritual life or spirit journey, worthy of the name always and forever, comes back to the presence of compassion lived out in daily life. It always does, no matter the faith or the tradition or the time or the human being standing in whatever building saying whatever words. Without a lived compassion and hearts of deep and conscious kindness, a spiritual journey is simply another hobby, not so very different from knitting or enjoying watching TV. We religious liberals have always been clear on this point, going at least as far back as the Epistle of James in the Western Christian tradition. The Epistle of James, that collection of wisdom teachings that stands in stark contrast to so much of what Paul had to say about by faith alone are we saved, that bedrock of Protestant, certainly early Protestant, faith. Our more liberal-minded theological forebears, or maybe just concrete thinkers like my mom, they and we who believe deeply in flawed yet ever hopeful human agency, we still resonate when we hear the famous words of the Epistle of James that ask more of us than, I would submit to you, a very heartfelt but ultimately not very connected Joel Osteen feel-good theology. Chapter 2, verses 12 to 17. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warm and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what is that? So also by faith itself, if it does not have works, is dead. That very simple sentiment was part of the deep foundational thinking that moved our theological predecessors, the earliest Unitarians and Universalists, away from their Calvinist hell and damnation roots, away from the sorrow, in some ways, of that song we sang, One Fine Morning I'll Fly Away. That may be a sentiment that thrills for us in our darker moments, but we've also said, let's not fly away. Let's make of this earth a kind of paradise if we can. They moved it towards a world shaped by human hands where we have an obligation to take our hands and make something useful and humane from that shaping. You want to know why we're standing up against the ICE detentions and deportations? Because they're deeply inhumane. They are not compassionate. They are not even that rational. What we need is a legal path to citizenship for people a lot like you and I, who've committed no crime other than trying to flee a desperate situation, much like my ancestors did 150 years ago, to come here and start again. But those predecessors, those early UUs, weren't just social reformers. They were religious people, people of faith, who, like the writers of that early book of James, were living in religious community and working it out, trying to understand their lives under the widest and most discerning spiritual telescope possible. They were people like Reverend Theodore Parker, who penned those words we read aloud earlier, and which some of you, I hope, also have found in bookmarks in your orders of service. Parker was very much part of the early formation of a distinctly Unitarian church movement at a terrible time in our national life. You think these times are bad? You should have been back in the 1840s and 50s when the country was slowly being torn apart by the questions of secession and slavery. Interestingly and informatively, Parker was shunned by his more conservative fellow Unitarian ministers at the time, who were more concerned with being seen as good, stable citizens and respectable in Boston society than in true freedom of thought and in the real expression of that deep kindness and compassion that James calls us out to do. Parker came out early and he came out often for the abolition of slavery. He didn't just do it for a year when it was sexy. He did it throughout his life, and it cost him some things. He famously kept a loaded pistol on his pulpit during part of his preaching because he was so reviled by the pro-slavery forces, including good New Englanders. What could not be more spiritually inspiring and deeply compassionate than Parker's words, echoed by King and so many others? Look at the facts of the world. You see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one, and my eye, it only reaches a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve or complete the figure by the experience of my sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. Look at the facts of the world. I am not as deeply spiritual as Parker. I don't know that I can truthfully say that I am as confident or hopeful that looking over our shoulders or looking ahead, we see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. But maybe Parker is asking us to do something a little different. Maybe he's asking us to look really far back and really far ahead, not in the ways we're used to. Not to the election of Donald Trump and the apparent triumph of this nativist bigotry and badness and greed and lying, or to Watergate, or even to the American system of chattel slavery. Maybe Parker is asking us to go way back to the people daring enough to write down the words of Jesus and his teachings, or Buddha and his, or all the other countless prophets, so that we might not ever forget that if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what is that? What is that? Parker doesn't pretend to know either. The arc of the moral universe is a long one, and my eye, it reaches only so far. But still, he tells us we can see it by conscience. What an interesting choice of words. To see by conscience. We have something already in us, inborn, and developed over time. Except for a few very damaged folks, all of us can recognize and even agree upon. We have ended slavery, not easily, and we are still in the throes of that system of servitude. But it did end. We actually know what we are to do in this lifetime. We have that gift of knowing in us, of conscience. We don't turn away from the world, despite wishing sometimes desperately that we could fly away. We dive deeper into it. And not only that, we have some sense, some assurance that we often lose, myself or the rest of them, but then we grasp again, which is why I think we show up in gatherings like this. We're desperate to grasp it again. That moral arc of the universe, it bends towards justice. And that means compassion for ourselves and a compassion that flows outwards. It's as simple as that. My friends, we are just 2 days away from Election Day here in New Jersey. And I hope all of you will get out there and vote. It's a hard-won right, and it's not over. But I'm here to tell you today that that is just the beginning, right? It is just a simple step, important, crucial, but just one step. We are arc benders, you and I, even when we can't see the end, even when it looks like a flat line. We have conscience, something inborn in us that we share together and strengthen in the common flame of coming together around a free belief that that line is bending towards justice. So this morning, I give you spirit and I give you justice, and together I say they combine to become something called the politics of justice. Where politics is not the machinations of Washington or even Trenton, though those are important. They are the politics of your conscience and of your kindest compassion. And if you walk away from here with nothing else in your pocket but that image of a straight line that far out there, with our help, is bending towards justice, then that will be enough. I hope you will join with us at UU Faith Action this year. I really do. And not just because it's my job. I'm going to ask a donation of you, and I don't mean a financial one. Of course, those are always welcome at this age. The donation I want from you is that you sign up to send at least one email this year to your legislator through UU Faith Action. There are 2 sign-up sheets and loads of pens out there, so there's very few excuses. Even if you just do one and you ignore all the rest of our emails, and I get how email works, it's exhausting. That will be a commitment to take that flat line and to see it bend, even beyond our sight, for the next generation and the next and the next. That is the donation I'd like you to make today. We are going to work together on this road that has been laid before us. We follow in beautiful human footsteps, all the way back to James and beyond, and right up to today. Who knows what they'll say about this congregation, about our work here in New Jersey? Who knows what they'll say about you when it's your time to fly away? I hope it's that you've walked with great kindness, but also with a sense of bending the arc of justice throughout your entire life. in all that you do. We walk together. Amen.
Amen.